Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite TV shows, movies, music, and more. We are your two autocratic polymaths of Midwestern minutia, flexing our dominance of multiple mediums to bring you the first ever two-part Too Much Information movie album tie-in, Purple Rain, baby! Shouts to Andre, who has been petitioning us on Twitter for months to do this. And I'm not sure if this would be more than am I more than you bargained for yet, baby? Because we're about to do 15 pages on just the record, and next week we're going to do the movie. So I've obviously now given away the order in which we are doing this, but my thought process was this. Which came first? Technically, the earliest Purple Rain song to be written was Baby I'm a Star, which Prince wrote in 1981. The bulk of the album was more or less written and recorded, finalized and recorded between July of 1983 and March of 1984, while the film started shooting on Halloween 1983 and wrapped 42 days later. So, while these two pieces of art are inextricable, for our purposes, this part will tackle Prince's life and career in music up to and including the album, and part two will focus on the movie's production, reception, legacy, etc. Just gonna speak truth here. There's never and never will be again a person like Prince. Full stop. Not gonna happen. I apologize to all of you, Jacob Collier, like all you bedroom musical polymaths who think you are coming close, but you're not. This guy had the entirety of the Black American musical tradition at his fingertips, but was also constantly, relentlessly pushing forward into the future with drum machines and synths. He was so horny, but also so mystical in a way that made cosmology and dirty talk seem like natural bedfellows. And he was so relentlessly self-driven and self-possessed in his productivity and curation of artistic output that there is a very good likelihood we will never truly hear everything the man did. That's Prince. Who else? You know, you can't have someone that combines James Brown's charisma and also self-regard, Michael Jackson's fleet feet and sky-high voice, Jimi Hendrix's guitar wizardry and moon-eyed mysticism, Sly Stone's color and gender-blind vision of musical utopias, Stevie Wonder's musical polymathy, and then all of that went into a blender with, again, so much horniness. And also androgyny, studio wizardry, fashion iconoclasm, dancing, and he did it all from Minneapolis. It's like somebody asked John Carpenter once what they thought about John Romero, and he was like, well, he makes movies in Pittsburgh. Somebody's got to do it. So it's like, yeah, man, you think about Prince, you think about guys on Prince's level, and it's like, I don't know, Miles Davis, like the center of the, like in New York or in for the decades, or Stevie Wonder, you know, in Detroit and LA, and then you're like, oh yeah, and then there's Prince out in the hinterlands creating an entire universe unto himself.
Heigl, I have a really shameful confession to make about Prince, and I'm really embarrassed to do this, both in front of you and also our dear listeners. Let me put it this way. The time when we were coming into awareness, musical awareness, I should say, in the late 90s and early 2000s, was kind of the worst time to be a Prince fan, I feel.
It was. And
okay.
No, dude, we're in alignment on this. Because,
good.
My earliest musical memories are just like in the car. And with my dad, the two classic rock stations that he vacillated between would never have played any Prince. And what my mom had on in the car was just like the more bland kind of 60s, 70s pop throwback. And that included Motown. That's the first place I heard Motown. But I did not hear Prince on that either.
No.
And you would see Purple Rain like named as stuff, and you kind of, oh, that song sounds familiar. But like the depth of his artistry was not at the fore of the conversation in the mid-90s, because he was churning out jazz fusion records with no name, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this was the whole artist formerly known as era, and he was kind of, I feel like in the late 90s and early 2000s, an eccentric punchline, like a sort of slightly less troubling Michael Jackson. And this might just have been the Dave Chappelle connection, but I sort of viewed Prince as a kid as like on par with Rick James or something, which...
No, that's real. And I don't get into the weeds of that in this episode because I didn't think it was germane to the conversation, but it is a real thing. I think if I recall correctly, Rick James did like accuse Prince of like ripping off his his sort of vibes and music. Let me just fact check that real quick.
So yeah, I mean, the 80s in general have always been kind of my big blind spot for the reasons you mentioned. I mean, I aligned myself with like the boomer music of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I lived through the 90s and onward. So the 80s were just kind of my own personal dead zone. So I admittedly didn't dive super deep into his catalog probably until after his death, I have to say. And for that, I feel like I need to atone.
Oh, interesting.
When did you get into him?
College. My big thing was I bought Sign of the Times on cassette tape and played it in my Saturn constantly. So like that album is more in my head than any other one. But I also really love Dirty Mind. Obviously Purple Rain. 1999 is great too. I start to tune out around the Under the Cherry Moon Around the World era.
That's the correct.
Well, you know, there are people who are whole hog for it. And so that's, I mean, that's my standard boilerplate white hipster music guy answer about Prince. And the fact that he was famous for chasing his music offline. That was the big thing. I mean, when we were both writing professionally about music online, the whole thing about Prince was that you couldn't find it. He was just like, buy the CDs from my website. You know, there was all of it was not on YouTube. And you would hear these rumors about like, oh, Prince did this legendary cover of Creep at Bonnaroo or something.
Yes,
and people talked about it like it was the Sermon on the Mount and no one could see it or hear it. And then like, he quipped about it. I mean, he was like, the Creep cover's back on YouTube. Get it before my lawyers do, or something like that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that was the other big thing.
It was his doing though, right? I mean, he was the one who...
I mean, he was one of the... And again, the incredible forward thinking of him. Like, before Taylor Swift really brought in the weeds music contract to the fore.
To the masses,
Yeah, to the masses, exactly. Prince was out there saying everything. Like, if
but
you
he
don't
wrote
own
slave on his face, yeah.
You know, I think his thing was, if you don't own the masters, if you don't own your masters, your label owns you. Something to that effect. And he was so, you know, he dug his pointy little heels in, man. And that's what gave him the hip pain that killed him.
Wow.
Too dark?
Well,
No, I mean, I admire these, you know, him and Pearl Jam, who like essentially blacklisted themselves from the live circuit for years in the 90s because they were trying to fight Ticketmaster. Like, if you're at the top of the world and you use that platform to push back against some it will cost you, but it is that much more admirable.
Well said.
Well, from Prince's less than royal upbringing to how the title track was inspired by Bob Seger, possibly Journey, and Stevie Nicks, to how Prince and the band wound up covered in shredded doves at one video shoot. Here's everything you didn't know about Prince's Purple Rain. Prince, much like the recent topic of this podcast, Jim Morrison, could be cagey about his upbringing in interviews. Throughout the early 80s, he'd variously describe his dad as Italian-Filipino, half black, half Italian, or describe his parents' marriage as an interracial one. The truth of the matter is that both of his parents were black. His father, John L. Nelson, took part in the Great Migration, as it's referred to, of many black people from the South coming up in the post-war era to find work in the cities. He left Louisiana for Minneapolis, and he would work at the Honeywell plant for over 30 years. He then fell in love with Maddie Shaw, a young jazz singer, and the two married. It was Nelson's second marriage, and they had their firstborn child, Prince Rogers Nelson, born on June 7th, 1958. He was named after his dad's stage name, which is funny, and they called him Skipper to differentiate him from his dad, Prince, which is one of the most cognitively disconnected nicknames I could ever imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And didn't he like answer to that even later in life too?
I don't know, man. I mean, part of what we'll get into is that the ascendancy of this album and film like started
Reconnected him with his dad.
Oh, no. I was going to say isolated him further. So although Prince's parents split when he was 8, they'd already given him a musical jumpstart. His dad played drums, Maddie sang, they were a working jazz trio, and Prince would recall later that watching his parents' band at the age of 5 jump-started his love of music. But Prince's relationship with his dad did not improve after the divorce. Famously, he was kicked out of his dad's house as a teenager, with one explanation I've read being that he was caught with a girl, and his dad was super conservative and religious sexually and every other way, and disowned him or threw him out of the house. And he basically just spent years bouncing around with friends and relatives in Minneapolis. And he would often tell the story of breaking down in a phone booth while begging his dad to take him back home as the last time I cried.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's grim. Prince would later just describe his dad as a very strict disciplinarian, but he might have been doing some waffling there, maybe. Susan Rogers, who was Prince's engineer from 1983 to 1988, her name will come up a lot here, said that he once confided to her that he'd been abused as a kid. She said he had a weird name, he was small, which would have been enough to get bullied in Minneapolis.
Yep.
I wonder if any of the replacements ever bullied him. No, I don't think so. I think they just missed each other on the fame. Like Prince was like famous enough that Purple Rain was taking off while the replacements were still like not the replacements at all. Like Paul Westerberg has something about like, I tried to dig it up, but I don't have the replacements book anymore because it's so sad. Bob Mears' fantastic Trouble Boys, the story of the replacements. And I think in there's an anecdote about Paul Westerberg seeing Prince at like a urinal in First Avenue, and he like knew who he was. First Avenue is the Minneapolis music venue, which you'll also hear a lot during this episode. And he was like, "Hey, Prince, like, what's up?" And Prince, like, while peeing, was like, "Life," and then walked out. Anyway.
I just want to say, for anybody who's curious about what a young Prince was like at age 10 or 11, there's a great video clip that was making the rounds a few years ago of a young Prince, I think he's 11 years old, being interviewed on a picket line for a teacher's strike by a local news crew. And it's very clearly, obviously Prince. Like, he still has that attitude and that swag at age 11. It's amazing. So definitely look that up.
Yeah, it's really quite adorable.
But also threatening.
There's that like laser focus in his eyes.
I know.
Prince would also put stronger claims in his songs than he would in interviews. He has a song called Papa that features the lyric, "Don't abuse children or else they turn out like me." Weird thing to say. I mean, you know, whatever that means. Abuse in that could cover a lot of words.
Oh, yeah.
Prince didn't get along with his stepdad, his mom's new husband. And I believe he described clashing with him. But that left her to teach young Prince about the birds and the bees when it was time. And she did so by giving him some old Playboys, which is hilarious when you consider his horniness. But, you know, he was also a shy, really introverted kid who didn't conform to Minneapolis's usual vision of masculinity, and he was a target for that, too. He would say, "I went through a lot when I was a boy. They called me sissy, punk, freak, the hard F word. See, girls loved you, but the boys hated you. They called me princess." And also in his song, he talked about having seizures until he was 7. So just throw that into the mix.
Yeah. He didn't really talk about that until the end of his life. He gave an interview to Tavis Smiley. He said, "I used to have seizures when I was young. My mother and father didn't know what to do or how to handle it, but they did the best they could with what little they had. My mother told me one day I walked into her room and said, 'Mom, I'm not going to be sick anymore.' And she said, 'Why?' And I said, 'Because an angel told me so.'"
Yes.
And so it was.
Incredible Prince answer.
Yeah.
As he grew into adolescence, Prince found himself living with a high school friend who had a band, and he basically lived in this kid's basement for a while, getting familiar with various instruments and honing his craft. And he was also, as is well known by this point, no slouch at basketball during this time period either. And once again, He must have had a time machine, man, or like was not sleeping, because the 10,000 hours he put in to achieve, I mean, it might have been 10,000 hours at each of those things. You know, people, not just the 4-octave vocal range, but the guitar playing, the bass playing, the keyboard playing. I mean,
The drumming.
yeah, that is just really, to get that fluent, he must not have been sleeping.
The basketball,
Yeah.
the sex.
Yeah. And also so tiny.
He was 5'2". That's like Lady Gaga height. That can't be. How could he have been that good at basketball?
Getting dominated by Prince on the basketball court and then like seeing him later prancing around in like assless chaps and ripping a guitar solo must have crushed so many Minneapolis men in their middle age.
And the ping pong. We forgot about his prowess at ping pong.
Yes, your favorite story, which I'm sure have you shoehorned this in later?
I didn't know, no, but
Tactful of you.
yeah, Prince and Michael Jackson faced off on the ping pong table. Famous musical rivals. That was kind of their main showdown.
Who won?
Oh, Prince.
Hell
Prince
yeah.
Prince scared off MJ, and as MJ slunk away, Prince said the very un-PC. Did you see that? He's playing like Helen Keller.
And then what's the other Prince MJ thing where Prince aggressively
Plays slap bass in his
played
face.
slap bass in Michael Jackson's face at an award
And Michael
show.
Michael Jackson the next day referred to him as a big meanie. Goes, Will.i.am was like, hey, Prince has got a show tonight, Michael. Do you want to go see him? He's playing in Vegas. Want to come with me? Oh, all right. And so he like went and like sat in the front row, and then Prince came down and played aggressive slap bass in his face, and it ruffled Michael.
He's a big meanie.
Yeah. So Prince co-founded his first band with his cousin at age 13, and they were called Grand Central, which I assume was a nod to Graham Central Station, founded by slap bass. But again, get back on the slap bass train. Slap bass pioneer Larry Graham. And young Prince's group played original songs that were inspired by Sly and the Family Stone and Earth, Wind and Fire. But one of his weirder, or I guess I'll say unexpected influences was Joni Mitchell. Did you know this?
Yes, he loved Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell.
One of when Piano and a Microphone came out, the which we'll get to later. The 1983 recordings of him just running through really songs and sketches for songs on the piano. People pointed out how some of the melodies and playing sounded like some of like Joni Mitchell's River in particular was compared to Purple Rain, which I think is really funny. But yeah, I love that for him. And also you can hear it, like some of the effortless like upper register leaps navigating around there. It's like not that hard to connect Joni's voice to Prince's voice.
Joni's name features prominently on the cover art for Prince's 1981 album Controversy. And the song title Ice Cream Castles is a reference to her immortal feel-bad anthem, Both Sides Now. And Prince, I love this so much. He apparently sent her so many fan letters as a young boy that Joni's management thought it was, quote, from the lunatic fringe. and he went to see her play in Minneapolis at age 15. So what would that have been, around like 1973 or so?
Yeah.
And Joni said years later that she actually remembered him. She said he had distinctive eyes like an Egyptian wall painting, which is pretty cool.
She's not wrong.
Yeah. In a 1985 interview for Rolling Stone, Prince was asked whether or not he liked any current pop music. Prince replied, nah, the last album I loved all the way through was The Hissing of Summer Lawns, Joni Mitchell's 1975 album. Awesome.
I feel like he would have been a Hejira guy.
Is that the one with
the fusion one with Jocko?
Yeah.
And,
I can see that.
Yeah. Another of Prince's early bands, Champagne, recorded at a local Minneapolis studio with Chris Moon, who's a local concert promoter. He wrote jingles as well, and he took notice of Prince's talents, and he offered Prince recording time at his studio, which was called Moon Sound, in exchange for his help with some songs. Prince got the keys to the studio, I believe, immediately after or on the day he graduated high school. And he just went to work. He started putting demos together. At one point, he went to New York to shop some around. Didn't get any traction there. But Moon had played some of Prince's demos to a local music impresario named Owen Husney, who agreed to finance Prince's next steps, getting his music off the ground. Fun fact, when he met Prince, Husney nicknamed Prince's afro J7 because it was that much bigger than those of the Jackson 5s. Husney got Prince into the door at Warner Brothers, whom he signed with in June of 1977. So a month out of high school?
Wow, yeah.
Warner's wanted to give him a producer, and one of the big things that Prince did to convince them that he could operate with semi-autonomy was to visit one of their studios. And Lenny Waronker, who's one of the Waronker.
I still don't know how to say his name. I know he's a big deal in
he's a
music
famous
history.
A&R guy for Warner's. And other suits came in to the studio just to watch 18-year-old Prince sit down at a drum set to record a drum track all the way through, then picked up a bass and recorded a bass line all the way through, then move over to guitar and keys and vocals, and that song was just as long as We're Together. So they obviously saw that this kid knew what he was doing and allowed Prince to produce his first record. But they installed a guy named Tommy Vicari, who Prince probably only allowed because Prince was a huge Santana fan, which is really interesting to me. And that guy's was brought on as executive producer. But Prince being Prince, that did not pan out.
And Prince, in your estimation, kind of lost the plot while recording his first record. He eventually fired Vicari after basic tracking was complete and became obsessed with overdubbing, eventually finishing his debut album 2 months late at a cost of, this is insane even now, $170,500, which is just $500 short of Warner Brothers' planned budget for Prince's first 3 albums.
I love it. Blowing your 3-album deal on one record.
That's over $1 million in today money. That's insane.
I mean, this kind of could happen back. I mean, it still happens today. It's just happening with TikTok. But it's like, this is what happened with Kate Bush,
Oh, yeah.
They just were blown away, and they're like, let's throw money at it and just see what happens. Because you could do that in the 70s. What a great era.
Prince's debut, For You, came out in April 1978, famously with him credited as playing 23 different instruments on it. I don't know if I could name 23 instruments, let alone pick out 23 instruments on there. Okay, maybe I could.
I don't know, man. When you're splitting hairs between synths, piano, electric piano, organ,
all right.
Because it's kind of and I'm sure every individual percussion piece was also credited, but it's like that guy from the Brian Jonestown Massacre being like, I play 200 instruments. And it's like, yeah, you play enough about guitar to play weird ethnic stringed instruments and get a sound out of them. And you know how to make tambourines and shakers and sound good, but you do not play those instruments. I'm sorry. In the spirit, you do in the spirit, if not in the letter, if not the spirit, Yeah. Because I'll tell you one thing, you listen to a really solid tambourine player and your mind will be blown.
That's true.
That a serious tambourine player can do.
Not a Davy Jones, but yeah.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, and we have in our popular consciousness relegated that instrument to just something the lead singer does to make themselves feel better about not contributing anything.
The title track of For You features 46 layered vocal tracks from Prince. God damn.
Yeah. On tape, too. On tape.
So it's like Bohemian Rhapsody level, the tape went translucent.
And also, the thing is, to do these, Susan would talk about how he would just do stuff in one take. Because the songs were just already in his head, and he would just be like, well, there's the drum track all the way through. And then do his own punches, too. Just totally self-possessed, self-contained production unit.
Oh, yeah, that was a crazy quote later on in here when his engineer was like, yeah, he would sit down and play the drums just listening to nothing, just the sound in his head. No click track, I don't think. Just nope, I know exactly where everything's going to go, and I am locked into the music in my mind.
Yeah.
Insane. But Soft and Wet, the single track released from Prince's debut, released on his 20th birthday, which is even more depressing to me. Only made it to number 92 on the Billboard Hot 100. That was in August 1979. And then a little over a year later, in August 1979, Prince released the first single from a self-titled second album, I Want to Be Your Lover, one of my favorite Prince songs. That song entered the Hot 100 at the number 85 slot. It deserves so much more.
It really does.
It really does. The song, which Prince later said was about his crush on pianist and singer Patrice Rushen, eventually reached number 11 on the Hot 100 in January 1980 and held there for 2 weeks, capturing the top spot on Billboard's Hot Soul Singles chart for 2 weeks. I love how many songs were inspired by Prince's unrequited crushes.
The man loved love.
Yes, I appreciate that. Prince's next two albums, Dirty Mind in 1980 and Controversy in 1981, made him the proverbial critical darling, but only Controversy made any chart impact, with its title track landing at a dismal number 70 on the Billboard charts in 1980.
Didn't he have the disastrous tour opening for the Rolling Stones around this time, too?
Oh, yeah, that was up there with like Hendrix opening for the Monkees in terms of just misplaced talent being combined.
1981 at LA, the Coliseum.
Oh, it was just the one?
Yeah. Oh, my God. As Prince and his band tried their best to get through the set, they faced a barrage of fried chicken, bottles, cans, and other objects. All too soon, a wave of racist and homophobic slurs followed.
Oh, my.
The Brown Mark, whose name I believe is just Mark Brown, is Prince the Revolution bassist, was like, imagine this was a quote he gave, imagine 94,000 people throwing food at each other. I got hit in the shoulder with a bag of fried chicken. Then my guitar got knocked out of tune by a large grapefruit that hit the tuning keys.
Who brings a grapefruit to a Rolling Stones concert? The hell is wrong with you people?
Yeah, I know. They only got through 4. They quit after 4 songs, and Prince left the venue in tears. So talking to his dad was not the last time he cried. Caught you in a lie there, Prince.
Apparently, you dug this up. I didn't know this. There's a version of When You Were Mine, which is one of your favorite Prince songs.
So good.
Which was done by Mitch Ryder of Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, a great 60s R&B band.
Well, I would have thought it was the Cyndi Lauper version because that's the one that's that's the one that's on She's So Unusual, and that cover bangs.
It does.
But I would have thought that would have been the highest. But bar trivia, it was Mitch Ryder.
That's bizarre.
Prince parted ways with Husney in 1980.
Remind us who Husney is? I forget now. Sorry.
Owen Husney, the guy who helped him get signed to Warner's. He was sort of the Minneapolis impresario that the original studio guy put Prince in touch with. At this point, it was 1999, which always confusingly was released in 1982, that changed Prince's fortunes from being a critical darling to more of a mainstream quantity. Little Red Corvette and Delirious were both top 10 singles, and the double album sold over 4 million copies in the US and another close to 2 million more internationally. And then Prince broke his album a year streak in 1983. And this was fortunate because that was the year of Thriller and not much else. It was also a good use of time because the next Prince project would position him as no other pop star, not even his chief rival, Michael Jackson, had ever been. Purple Rain the album and Purple Rain the movie.
So much of Prince's myth at the time was centered around his isolationist genius. Dick Clark famously asked Prince how many instruments he played, to which Prince answered, thousands. Which got a crowd laugh, but the image of Prince is that of an eccentric island surrounded by drum machines and guitars and synths. This wasn't exactly correct, though. Des Dickerson played the guitar solo on Little Red Corvette, and Morris Day wrote Party Up on Dirty Mind in exchange for getting Prince to write more songs for his side project with Day at the time. Prince's former bassist and childhood friend Andre Simon has always been alleged to be the real writer of Do Me Baby, though that's the whitest that's ever been said. Though no official Prince release credits him as such. The song Kiss even originated as a song Prince gave another band working with Prince's engineer, David Z. Z essentially reinvented the song, and when Prince heard what he'd done, he took it back, crediting Z only with the arrangement on the final track.
Yeah, it's really interesting the degree to which Prince meddled with his own songs. And like just presenting them to people in their barest skeletons, hearing what they did and then taking what they did and undoing some of it and keeping more of it, or simply replacing what they added with his own version of their contributions.
Didn't he do that with, was it with Bad? It was with something that Michael Jackson wanted him to work on, I think. And then he was like, no, I'm not doing this with you. But if I did, here's how it should go. And he sent him a version that he did on his own just to be like, this is how I would have done it. But no, you can't have this.
Michael, you're correct. Michael wanted Prince to duet with him on Bad.
Yeah.
And
Prince was like, no, but if I did, here's how it should go.
I saw Quincy's name come up in this as it does. Producer Quincy Jones set up a meeting between the two in the summer of 1986. So Michael sent Prince a demo. Yes, you were correct. I don't know why I'm bothering to correct you, but I have now verified this. Michael sent Prince an early version of Bad, and then Prince re-recorded virtually everything and sent it back. Do you know what Prince's nickname for Michael was?
No.
Camille.
Why?
Because that was also the name of Prince's sped up, tape manipulated female voice. That's what he nicknamed it. So he also called Michael Jackson that. It's like the rest of the Rolling Stones calling Mick Jagger Brenda.
Oh yeah, and didn't Freddie Mercury and Elton John and Rod Stewart and all those like early 70s British rock like future sirs all have names for each other also that were like Brenda. I'm trying to remember what they were. They were all,
I don't know,
like very upper middle class English woman names.
Mimsy. Purple Rain was not destined to be one of these cases, however. This whole situation, though, had its roots in 1999. To sharp-eyed fans, Prince snuck "and the Revolution" as a credit line on the cover of 1999. Now, of course, it was written backwards and in the middle of a weird football-shaped doodle that was affixed to the I in his name, but it was the first time a backing band had been credited on his release. The core of this band, Mark Brown, always referred to as Brown Mark on bass, Bobby Z on drums, who I believe, God, there's so many Davids in the Prince story too.
Is he related to David Z? I think they're brothers.
Yes. Sorry, I did have this and then forgot to mention this. David Z is his real name is David Rifkin. He was a member of Lips Inc.
Oh, wow. Funky Town.
And he also produced Fine Young Cannibals' She Drives Me Crazy.
Weird.
And he is the eldest of three brothers. His youngest brother, Bobby Z, was the original drummer in The Revolution.
Cool.
Oh, and then keyboardists Matt Dr. Fink and Lisa Coleman, they had been with the band for years. Bobby Z and David Fink were part of the very first live band that Prince put together to support his first record. Promo shots of The Revolution are so hilarious around this time because the rest of them are in the like classic Dayglow, gay, pirate, new romantic thing that we associate with Prince. And then there's a guy in surgical scrubs.
So Village People.
And that was Matt Dr. Fink. So guitarist Des Dickerson left the band after 1999. I've heard it was either that he wanted to strike out on his own or he was like a religious man and increasingly uncomfortable with Prince's horniness. But crucially, he was replaced by Lisa Coleman's then girlfriend, Wendy Melvoin. And Wendy and Lisa became enormously crucial to Prince's sound for the next few years. And the image, too. You know, Prince was sort of keen to highlight the fact that there were women who were not entirely closeted, but still sort of closeted in his band. Also, Wendy Melvoin was 18 when she joined Prince's band. So they also weren't like particularly closeted. As I mentioned earlier, they were kind of walking a weird line. Wendy Melvoin would later tell Out magazine, "I just didn't want to be a lesbian musician. I felt really uncomfortable with that role. I was already fighting being a guitar player in a man's world, and then to have that on top of it, it just didn't seem like something I could handle." And then Lisa would joke, "With Prince and the Revolution, I think it was just taken for granted that we were supposed to be the gay representatives in the band. And being in the Revolution often meant more than sitting or playing through Prince's famously grueling rehearsals." Brown Mark said, "My first assignment before I even picked up a guitar was in Prince's living room. Look at myself in the mirror, 8 hours a day. He would tell me how to stand. He'd say, 'No, pivot your foot that way. Okay, now turn your cheek to do this. Get your shoulder up. Bend your shoulder back.'" Prince also made all of the Revolution take ballet lessons to prep for being on screen in Purple Rain and to dance in the When Doves Cry video.
It's like Bob Fosse.
I know. Yeah. So Wendy and Lisa are the ones having the like sexy dialogue at the beginning of Computer Blue. They're also super important to Raspberry Beret. Sometimes it snows in April. And also Prince, as we mentioned earlier, would sometimes just slap his name on things that they had brought to him as a song. This relationship was also compounded by the fact that Prince was dating Wendy Melvoin's sister, Susanna, for a little while.
Anyway, we mentioned earlier that Purple Rain, the album, came first before the movie, but Prince had been kicking around the idea of a film for some time. Lisa Coleman told Spin in 2009, the idea of doing a movie had been bubbling for years. Prince carried a notebook, and he'd always come up with little scenarios on a plane or on buses, or back then in the occasional station wagon.
I have a motorcycle.
Of course, the way the film came into being was just a case of Prince's tremendous self-confidence. The Purple One had been with one management group since the late 70s and would ultimately stay with them until 1989. But in early 1983, their contract was about to expire, and one of their team members, Bob Cavallo, got a call from his associate, Steve Fargnoli, then out on tour with Prince. Carvalho told Uncut Magazine, Steve says, "You're not going to believe this. Prince says he'll re-sign with us if we get him a motion picture." And this is Prince's quote, "I want it from a major studio. I don't want it from some drug dealer or diamond jeweler that you find. And I want my name above the title." I was shocked. I thought, holy Christ, how am I going to handle this? Now, we'll cover this in next week's episode, which focuses on the film Purple Rain. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that Prince was confronting, largely by willpower, two huge artistic projects. Molding and working on songs with the Revolution for an album that would be a companion to a film that he'd only scribbled notebook notions of. Purple Rain's eventual director, Albert Magnoli, recalled Prince meeting him and saying that he had about 100 songs in mind for the film. But as the pair refined the story, eventually the album's 9-track sequence was whittled into place. Wednesday, with singer Jill Jones, and Electric Intercourse both made it, but then were eventually cut. Prince had also wanted to release Purple Rain with songs from Morris Day and Apollonia 6, but was convinced not to release another double album as a follow-up to 1999, which was a double album.
Prince stopped putting out so much music.
Yeah.
What was I going to say?
Your drip is too... Wait, what's the...
Yeah, your smoke too tough.
Yeah.
Your drip too crazy. They'll kill you for it, Prince. And they almost did. Yeah, man. Prince is kind of the embodiment of that tweet that's like R.I.P. to Icarus, but I'm built different. Better. Yeah. Maybe better than or it's R.I.P. to everyone killed by the gods for their hubris, but I'm different. Better than maybe even the gods. And Prince was correct. Like, just the balls on that tiny man.
Yep.
God love him.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
Hello, folks. It's me, the mean one, Alex, from Too Much Information.
I'm here too.
Jordan's here too. For a variety of reasons that are not interesting, Jordan and I have, in our quest to make this thing as efficient as possible and justify the enormous amount of time we spend on it weekly, have been trying a variety of things, and we are now at the begging stage. We're not going to do a paywall. We're not going to do a Patreon. But what we are going to do is drop I am told it is pronounced Ko-fi, which is sort of a digital tip jar into this episode's description. I know people complain about the ads, but trust us, we're not seeing ad revenue. And this is a way to make it a little more sustainable and let us keep doing it, essentially. If the average monthly listenership of this podcast just gave us 50 cents, it would be a truly affecting amount of money. And if everyone gave $1, it would be like life-changing for a few months. So that's all there is. We're not doing a payroll. We're not doing a Patreon. We're going to drop a Ko-fi link in there. And if you feel so compelled, you may donate to it. And we will be ever so grateful and not let it go to our heads or affect our work in any way. Probably. That is all. On to our regularly scheduled programming. Since Purple Rain was before the construction of Prince's custom mansion performance recording basketball court compound Paisley Park. The album was recorded in a few different Minneapolis locales. It was a former pet food warehouse that Prince and the Revolution shared with Morris Day and the Time at 651 Highway 7 in St. Louis Park, and then Prince's home studio at the place that he lived from 1980 to 1985. And also, as we'll get to later, Minneapolis's famed First Avenue venue. The sessions were immediately more collaboratively minded with the Revolution. It was a very creative time, Matt Fink told Pop Matters in 2009. There was a lot of influence and input from band members towards what he was doing. He was always open to anybody trying to contribute creatively to the process of writing. Also crucial to this time period, as we mentioned earlier, is sound engineer Susan Rogers, who was hired after Prince parted ways with his previous engineer. Rogers arrived in Minneapolis from LA and was tasked first with moving Prince's studio from his house into the warehouse. So welcome to Minneapolis, welcome to your new job. Move this recording console from my apartment into a warehouse and then set it up all over again. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Or are we? No, I think we're actually making good time. Yeah. Let's go through these songs.
One of the most important dates in the history of Purple Rain is August 3rd, 1983, when Prince and the Revolution played a benefit show for the Minnesota Dance Theater Company at the city's First Avenue venue.
That raised $20,000.
Oh my God.
Right?
Let's see if we can do better than that on this show. Wow, that is wild. 4 songs from that set, Let's Go Crazy, I Would Die For You, Baby I'm a Star, and Purple Rain, were captured by the Record Plant Studio mobile recording truck parked outside the venue. But crucially, though the version of Let's Go Crazy captured that night is the one heard in the film, it's not the one that wound up on the record. Prince reconvened the Revolution at the warehouse 4 days later for another go at it, literally just setting up in the 100 by 50 foot room with high ceilings and no isolation and wheeling the console over to where they were playing. Not ideal recording setup.
Yeah, Susan was like, concrete walls, big cavernous space, but I just did what he said and made it work.
Let's Go Crazy was written by Prince to be a catchy single, and he talked in 1997 about having to revise it from the initial draft. As I wrote it, Let's Go Crazy was about God and the de-elevation of sin. But the problem was that religion as a subject is taboo in pop music. People think that the records they release have got to be hip. But what I need to do is tell the truth. Obviously, he was not a fan of Brian Wilson's God Only Knows, or George Harrison's My Sweet Lord.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You do have to take Prince with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
He was everyone, and people kind of talk about how he almost felt like Wendy, Lisa, and Susan all kind of talked about how he sort of, what's that line from Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut? Is like, we are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful with what we pretend to be.
Wow.
And they talked about how Prince was just this sweet, shy guy. But as he became Prince, he felt more obligated to put on that persona and that character in public. And, maybe to his detriment, because he seemed inscrutable and bizarre and perhaps unintentionally hilarious half the time he was in public. But it's just so funny to me that everyone was like, yeah, he was just like the quietest, nicest little guy. He's a sweet little boy. Take Me With You. The song was originally intended for Vanity, the model musician Prince met in 1982. Her real name was Denise Catherine Matthews, but Prince, after first trying to name her Vagina, pronounced Vagina,
Jesus,
christened her Vanity, and, as was his wont, began building both a band and an album around her. Nasty Girl was the first Vanity 6 release and became a minor hit in September of 1982, though Vanity was uncomfortable with the sexually explicit music and image that Prince was forcing on her. So, consequently, a year later, as they're getting ready to shoot Purple Rain in September of 1983, Vanity abruptly quits the band and pulls out of the movie. So Prince held on to the song and then reshaped it around the new woman that would be taking this role and place, Patricia Cotero, aka Apollonia. And Susan Rogers said that this was very difficult for Prince because she just said that Apollonia could not sing. Prince came in and coached her through it line to line. And the thing that I find most hilarious about this whole situation is that Apollonia was dating David Lee Roth at the time. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. She told the Sunset Sound Studio, they do like a podcast, like live show, and this was in 2021. And she said Prince was hell-bent on maintaining this illusion that he had discovered her. And when David Lee Roth would send her flowers, it made Prince mad. She said he didn't let me get the flowers. He didn't want me to be seen with anybody else. He wanted to be the one to discover me. Prince was the one that said, don't go out with someone famous in public until the movie settles. And hilariously, Apollonia in that same bit contends that Prince started doing mid-air splits from watching David Lee Roth do them in Van Halen first.
Wow, yeah. Well, with his heart still presumably reeling over the Vanity situation, Prince got back on the horse during Purple Rain's production, falling madly in love with new guitarist Wendy Melvoin's twin sister, Susanna. She was in a relationship at the time, though, leaving Prince to pine as only Prince could, by having flowers delivered to her house every day for over a year.
Only I can send flowers. David Lee Roth, you cannot.
Yeah. The track The Beautiful Ones was a last-minute replacement for the much less subtly titled Electric Intercourse, one of the live recordings from the August 1983 First Avenue show. Even though both songs were meant to be a beautiful expression of Prince and Apollonia's character's love story in the film, once Prince came up with The Beautiful Ones, it became clear, by his own admission, that the song was a better fit. Vanity would later claim the song had been written about her, but Prince shot her down, saying the love triangle in the song is about his character, Apollonia, and Morris Day, Prince's chief musical rival in the film. No, you can't have this song. Yeah,
this song is not about
you can't. Yes, no.
It is about Morris Day. We'll get into Morris Day in the time next episode. I did not shove it into this one. Computer Blue actually started life as a warehouse jam session. Matt Fink started playing a bass synth line, and the rest of the band just joined in and started jamming on it. Susan Rogers was there or David Z was there to record, and then Prince came back, like as was his wont, came back the following day and just re-recorded the whole thing himself. But it's cool because it has one very personal touch that's kind of a Russian nesting doll. The guitar solo in Computer Blue is based on a song that Prince's dad wrote.
Oh, yeah.
He had reappeared in Prince's life around this time and was often seen hanging at the warehouse or the live shows and the movie shoots. And Prince plays this tune on piano in the film, but he just transferred the melody over to guitar for the recorded version of Computer Blue, and that's why his dad has a writing credit on the song, which I think is just so cute. Computer Blue, as we mentioned earlier, is also known for its weird spoken word section between Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman.
Wendy? Yes, Lisa. Is the water warm enough? Yes, Lisa. Shall we begin? Yes, Lisa.
For Spin's oral history of Purple Rain in 2009, Lisa Coleman said, "I don't know what it means. Prince handed us a piece of paper and said, 'Will you guys go out there and say this?' I didn't think twice." Wendy Melvoin added, "We had no idea that it had some weird psychosexual connotations. Now it's like some odd tagline for us. I roll my eyes because some people say it like I've never heard it before." If you meet Wendy Melvoin, do not ask her if the water is warm enough yet. Just a horrible, weird thing to ask a woman in public, period, a stranger.
It is.
Some versions of this song were 12 to 14 minutes in length, but it was cut down to 7.5 minutes, a tight 7.5 minutes, when two late-era additions to Purple Rain, Take Me With You and When Doves Cry, were added. The 12-minute-plus version of the song, which features another spoken word track where Prince likens emotions to different rooms of a house, is out there. Refer to it as Prince hallway speech, as the hallway speech.
What room is sadness?
I believe it is the hallway. I don't know. I will now have to skip through this entire thing.
Oh, wait. I have it on Genius. He didn't like living home alone. The house where he lived had many hallways. It was a long walk to his bedroom because to him each hallway represented an emotion, every one vastly different from the next. One day while she was with him, he decided to name each one of them. She was at his side, one hand on his thigh. No, wait. She was sort of half a step behind him. Yeah, the grip on his thigh intensified as they walked slowly through the corridor. He named the hallway Lust, and as they passed through the next one, he named it Fear. The grip she now loosened, so he walked faster, her hands now trembling. She let drop to her side as he wrote the word insecurity. He looked in her eyes and smiled a demon's smile and quickly walked on to the next corridor. Walked on to the next corridor after corridor. He named almost all when he suddenly stopped. He picked up the word hate. She was gone. So he picked up the last one.
Love.
Pain.
Oh, pain. Okay.
Brackets. Solo.
I in my personal headcanon have this now image of Prince running through a series of doors with a woman a la Scooby-Doo to the set of Yakety Sax and scribbling various words like insecurity, hate, pain.
In his Chelsea boots and ruffles.
A custom-made guitar, soloing wildly with another hand as he's writing because it is praise Prince.
Custom-made guitar that spells pain.
We'll also cover the cloud guitar next episode. You folks, you poor rubes thought I wasn't going to get to the guitars. Oh, how wrong you were.
Bring it. Well, now we're going to talk about Darling Nikki, my favorite track, I'd have to say, on this album.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so basic. I just go for the title cut, man.
That's, this is going to make you sad. That's actually one of my least favorite songs on the album.
Do you not love Emotions?
I mean, no, not these days, my friends. No, I don't. Very much no. Give me Darling Nikki any day, or let's go crazy.
Fair.
For all the controversy it would cause later, Darling Nikki had humble beginnings as a basement track Prince finished at home. When his new engineer Susan Rogers showed up, presumably sore from moving his console around, he simply handed her the tape and told her to get a rough mix together. In the Purple Rain film, you'll remember that the song is directed towards Apollonia's character when she decides to work with Prince's character's rival, played by Morris Day. But that's not how it would be remembered after 11-year-old Karina Gore made the rookie move of listening to Purple Rain in her mother's earshot in 1984.
Karina Gore is kind of an unnecessarily metal name.
Yeah. That name is far too cool to be coming from Alan Tipper Gore. Karina Gore's mom, Tipper Gore, wife of Democratic Tennessee Senator Al Gore, overheard the lyrics to Darling Nikki, which famously make reference to the titular character, quote, masturbating with a magazine. Now,
I've never understood I don't believe it's clear as to whether it was a tool or inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question. Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Okay. This launched one of the stupidest moral panics of the 80s. The Parents Music Resource Center, convened by Gore with her friend Susan Baker, wife of then Secretary of the Treasury. I don't know the man's name. Doesn't matter.
No, just important to know that, as Dee Snider famously said in one of the VH1 countdowns, like, these wives got together and persuaded their husbands, and he his eyes get wide and he uses scare quotes. So
the group assembled a list of the, quote, Filthy 15, a playlist worth of songs that they deemed indicative of the moral rot that America's musicians were trying to breed in the nation's youth via their lyrics. Prince actually held the number 1 and number 2 slots with both Darling Nikki and a song he'd written for Sheena Easton, Sugar Walls. I love Sugar Walls. That song rips. No? But sadly, Vanity's Strap On Robbie Baby, a song from her solo album written about her vibrator, also made the list, but was not written by Prince, thus denying him the Filthy 15 hat trick.
Imagine had he had a full fifth of the Filthy 15. The power.
Yes, yeah. And as you mentioned, as anyone who tuned into VH1 at any point during the aughts will know, the Senate hearings convened at the behest of the Parents Music Resource Center, PMRC, brought together strange bedfellows from across the music industry to fight the organization. You mentioned Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys, I forgot about that, and Frank Zappa were all joined by John Denver,
Love it,
who opposed censorship in all its forms. Frank Zappa offered a typically caustic rejoinder to the group's efforts, saying that it was, quote, the equivalent of treating dandruff by decapitation, further adding that the proceedings were, quote, an ill-conceived piece of nonsense which fails to deliver any real benefit to children, but infringes the civil liberties of people who are not children.
Frank, he ran to his thesaurus when he got mad.
Yeah.
You know, like so many of his quotes are these elaborate dressing downs. It's like, you sat and thought that one out. You didn't pull that out of your pocket.
Oh, yeah.
The only material change that the PMRC resulted in was the parental advisory stickers to be placed on albums with lyrical material deemed unsafe for children, the design of which would become one of the hardest of all time. Of course, many musicians suggested the obvious, which was that these stickers suddenly began attracting young people to the records they were supposed to be prohibited from buying simply because they were now confirmed to be dangerous instead of the mere implication. Or as Ice-T would later rap much more succinctly, hey PMRC, you stupid f***ing assholes, the sticker on the record is what makes them sell gold.
Is that what's called a slant rhyme?
It is, actually. Perhaps most hilariously, a guy named Joe Stussy had presented a talk on backmasking. We covered backmasking before. It is the practice of bands and musicians allegedly inserting subliminal messaging into songs that are only heard when the record is played backwards. So this guy Joe Stussy does a presentation on backmasking during the PMRC hearings. But he failed to mention that Darling Nikki actually contains intentional and purposeful backmasking. At 3:42, there's backwards-sounding dialogue by Prince that is just repetitions and variations on the line, hello, how are you? And fine, because I know that the Lord is coming soon. And engineer Susan Rogers told Tape Op that Prince had a complex relationship with sex. He had a father who was a jazz musician, very religious, and his father had a very strong anti-sex views. So when Prince would have a strong statement of lust, like the song Darling Nikki, it's usually followed by some sort of exorcism, like, forgive me, get this out of me. The backmasking, she said, was his way of asking for forgiveness for having lust in his heart and doing it in a way that was artistic.
When Prince became a Jehovah's Witness in 2001, he actually shelved this song for a long time, and he didn't play it live again until 6 years later in 2007. Now we're going to talk about When Doves Cry. Despite being one of Prince's signature songs, it wasn't recorded until the film was actually in its editing stage. Prince's breakup with Apollonia 6 singer Susan Moonsey inspired the tune, and he was so insistent on its inclusion that they had to add an extra montage scene to slot it in. Although you've also read that it was the other way around, and the film's director, Albert Magnoli, said that he told Prince that he needed an extra song, and Prince delivered two, the other being God, a track that ended up as Purple Rain's B-side. Your mileage may vary.
I just think it's so good. Prince, I need an extra tack. Here's two. You're in the editing stage of this movie. I'm just going to drop one of the hardest songs ever, casually.
You find a way to work it in? Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I'll need to see dailies later.
Yeah. Either way, Prince and Susan Rogers, his engineer, had already spent something like 30 hours toying with the track When Doves Cry before he decided to strip it down to its constituent parts.
I believe the timeline of this is that the director asked him for this, and he wrote two of them in a day, and then spent the next day with Susan Rogers around with When Doves Cry. So it was like a 2 or 3 day process to deliver those songs fully formed and insist that they be slotted into a movie that was almost edited fully.
Susan Rogers, Prince's engineer, told The Guardian, "We would work fast and quietly without speaking. He would record the drums from top to bottom, listening to nothing, just the song in his head. Next thing, he'd play the bass part, and the keyboard part, the rhythm part, then his vocals, alone in the control room. But," she continued, "he'd get really quiet, and that's when he started getting rid of things. He stripped down the whole top line and then changed the tempo with the tape machine to see if it was going to work better slower or faster."
Top line is the vocal melody of a song. When people talk about top lining demos, they're talking about putting a original, in some cases, many versions of an original melody over bed tracks. Yeah, Prince was crazy for the tape machine. There's the whole Camille thing. And apparently there is an entire album of Camille songs coming out. I just saw that. It is a forthcoming posthumous album called Camille. You can hear some of that on some of the different albums. There's one he does on the Black album, and then he does another one. I think she also sings in one part of Sign of the Time, a song on Sign of the Times somewhere. But yeah. So Prince was listening to playback of When Doves Cry with his backing vocalist Jill Jones sitting next to him. Fun fact, Jill Jones and Lisa Coleman were supposed to sing on Baby I'm a Star, but Prince got annoyed with them at one point because they were giggling. So he kicked them out and finished the song with his own voice layered in. And you can actually hear it on the track, the point at which he stopped using their vocals and started using his own. Incredible. So in a 1999 interview with Bass Player magazine, Prince said that he made the last-minute change to the famous last-minute decision to strip the bass track out because the sound was just too conventional, like every other song with drums and bass and keyboards. And Prince said he told Jill Jones, if I could have my way, it would sound like this, and played it without the bass track. And she answered him gnostically, why don't you have it your way, Prince? Why don't you cleanse yourselves in the refreshing waters of Lake Minnetonka? And the rest of it is proverbial history. Weird enough, the song it does have a bass line that you can now hear online. It's not that it was recorded, it was just muted for the final mix, so it exists on the multi-track tape. The other bit of studio geekery in this song in particular is that Prince used the time-honored George Martin In My Life method of playing something that you physically cannot play at half speed and then using tape to speed it up. Of course, he did not extend this luxury to the Revolution's keyboardist, the aforementioned Matt Dr. Fink, who then had to play the song's two solos, which are something like 30-second notes at whatever the tempo is for this. Had to play them live. And he talked about, like, whenever we played that song live and it came time for the solos, Prince would look over at me like, yeah, I did that to you.
Session player Novi Navog, incredible name. Yeah, played electric viola on this track, and she recalled to Uncut how Prince used her first take. She said, I was just learning the song. I said, oh, let me do that part again. And he said, no, I like that feel. He loved first takes.
Spontaneity, baby. Best take I've found is the third.
Interesting.
And then you're just dry humping. You never do more than 5. One of Prince's biggest supporters of Warner was their then promoter for Black Radio, Mary Lou Badeau. And she said that Prince threw Warner, who already didn't know what to do with him, an even larger than usual curveball when he delivered When Doves Cry, a bassless, Spartan, icy song, and said, this is the lead single. What the F do we do with this? She recalled some execs saying. Radio will never accept this. Obviously, they were wrong. As we'll get into the numbers later, but When Doves Cry, #1 hit. You ever heard the Metallica cover?
No.
It's one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life.
When did they do that?
Right after he died. It was, it's Kirk Hammett. Kirk Hammett and bassist Robert Trujillo do this thing at Metallica shows where they just like, Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield like leave the stage and the other two just like sit there and noodle and do like their own little versions.
Oh, this kind of sounds familiar now.
And
God.
Yeah, they did it. You got to punch it in, man. Because it's, first of all, it's hilarious for them forcing a Metallica crowd to listen to When Doves Cry. And then it is just the most bass tone and like chud, knuckle dragging bullshit. And I think at one point, if I'm remembering this correctly, Robert Trujillo like tries to give the crowd like the "you sing the When Doves Cry" part, and there's just like baffled applause. Dude, this sounds like elementary school musicians like practicing before they have a drummer. Like the first guy you know with a bass, you invite him over, and you're like, "Yeah, man, like let's jam." And it's just like
Robin Kirk's Doodle. Oh,
yes.
It's actually on the Metallica YouTube channel.
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
and I engage in a kiss. The sweat of your body covers me. Can you, my darling, can you picture it if you can acquire a notion of violence and blue?
You look like Christopher Walken in Deer Hunter, having listened to that. I think when Stereo Gum posted this originally, they titled it, "This is what it sounds like when lugs cry."
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
So as we mentioned earlier, 3 album tracks, Purple Rain, I Would Die For You, and Baby I'm a Star, were all recorded live during one heroic set at Minneapolis' First Avenue. Before getting into the majesty of the title track of the album, let's hear a bit about how that night went. Engineer David Z had known Prince from the early days. As we mentioned earlier, he had an older brother named Cliff Rifkin, who is a regional promotion executive for Warner's in Minneapolis, helped grease the wheels of Prince's ascent to the label. David Z's older brother, Cliff Rifkin, was a regional promo exec for Warner's in Minneapolis, who had facilitated Prince's signing to the label, and his younger brother, Bobby Z, was Prince's drummer in the Revolution. So, used to rolling with Prince's punches, David simply prepared himself when Prince told him to get ready to record the band's live set. Susan Rogers had been hired by Prince but had not yet moved to Minneapolis. So Prince's manager, a guy named Alan Leeds, secured the record plant's mobile recording studio, simply known as the Black Truck. And it came with not just its state-of-the-art equipment, but 2 engineers, Dave Hewitt and a guy named Cooster McAllister. I'm getting all this from, I think, Sound on Sound, where they really get into the nitty-gritty, the recording stuff. Or no, Mix Online. But at the bottom of the article, people are like, there are a lot of Davids in Prince's orbit around now, and not all of these people could agree that they were there that night. So this is just a kind of melange. They set up everything pretty bare bones. He says the band was just listening to their mix through the monitors. You know, it was just kind of the live setting, your classic Scherzo and the guitar amps and all this stuff. But Prince was at this time apparently running 2 drum machines throughout the entire show. Like, one would just be the playback that Bobby was listening to keep everything on tempo, and then there was a separate one that he could trigger with a sample pad, which is insane for 1983 that he was putting people through this. We also talk a lot about recording trucks on this show. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, we do.
We talked about Neil Young's record truck. I think we then got into a discussion about the guy from Boston's truck that they parked outside of his apartment because he refused to record anywhere else. I have to, you know what I have to assume put them out of business was the invention of the solid state and or digital boards, because that meant that venues could afford their own and just start recording the house mixes. I think the first recording on a solid state console is Ry Cooder, Bop Till You Drop in 1980. Make of that what you will.
Recording during a live show meant that all 3 engineers had to keep an eye on the levels and ride the faders as the set progressed. Even a band as tightly rehearsed as the Revolution would have had consistent volume levels in mind while playing to a packed club. It must have been nerve-wracking and somewhat miserable both in the club and the truck. Bobby Z told The Guardian, that day at First Avenue, it was 90 degrees, a humid, wet August, cigarette smoke everywhere. It was a battle to get through, and it was kind of forging metal in hot conditions. But things went off smoothly, and David Z remembered a particularly memorable scene from the end of the night. Prince drove up to the truck after the show and asked how it sounded. He's talking to Mix Online. I was about to answer when a girl wearing a raincoat and nothing else stepped off the curb and flashed Prince. Then he drove away. That was pretty much our post-recording conversation. It was like a Fellini movie. One fun tidbit from the overdub session at LA's Sunset Sound. Some of the weird sounds heard just before the first verse of the song could be snare or cymbal hits played in reverse, but the studio engineer said they could also just be Prince scatting. He often added onomatopoetic effects as layers when he was tracking vocals.
Just so funny. And he did his vocal takes in the control room. They just put a Neumann, a U-47. Is that a Neumann? Telefunken? They put a U-47 on a boom stand over the recording console, and he would just stand in the room with the engineer and do take after take of comps and other layers. So you just imagine being in this room with Prince and you're hearing this like insane vocal parts, and then he just rewinds it back and just goes just like take after take after take. You're like, he's a genius. All right, on to the titular song. Purple Rain got its titular. Funny word.
Not my favorite. No, just not my favorite.
Oh, okay. On to the eponymous song. Purple Rain
No. The song itself is not one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah, idiot. Purple Rain got its start during the tour for 1999, which coincidentally saw Prince and the Revolution hit a lot of cities, I think right after Bob Seger had just blown through town. Like they were on the same route, but Bob Seger was like 2 or 3 days ahead of them, something like that. And Matt, Dr. Fink, remembers talking to Prince on the bus at one point, and Prince was just like, did not understand Bob Seger's appeal. And Matt Fink was like, well, Seger's got those big power ballads, like Turn the Page or We've Got Tonight. It really stirs people. And that seeded the idea in Prince's mind of writing something similar. But when you listen to the version of Purple Rain that's released on this piano and a microphone album that I mentioned earlier, it just sounds like the barest thumbnail sketch at that point. He has the verse melody, he has the chorus, and then he just kind of dicks around on piano, like very, very unfinishedly. And so as he went through these successive iterations, he began to fear that he had inadvertently copied the chord progression to Journey's Faithfully, which had been a monster smash in April of 1983. So he called Columbia and asked them to connect him with Jonathan Cain, Journey's keyboardist, who had written the song. Prince played him the song Purple Rain on the piano over the phone and said, these chord changes are close to Faithfully, and I don't want you to sue me. This apparently hadn't even crossed Cain's mind. He had later recalled telling Prince that he was flattered he'd even gotten a call. He said it was a classy move. And then he said, good luck with the song. I know it's going to be a hit.
Very classy. There is, however, yet another 80s icon who was involved with Purple Rain, Stevie Nicks. She and Prince had just worked together on Stand Back from her album The Wild Heart, and she claimed to have written that song by improvising a melody while listening to Little Red Corvette on the radio. So when it came time to record it, she asked Prince to come in and play on the song. You say he either played a synth or he came in and programmed the drum machine and added a bunch of other stuff, depending on who's telling the story.
Yeah, so Stevie Nicks and her keyboardist, and I think David Iovine was the engineer on this. I think they said like Prince came in and just like doodled on keys for a while, and that was his contribution. And the keyboardist was like, he only added one part. Prince, in his telling, said that Stevie and Jimmy Iovine couldn't figure out how to program the drum machines. And so Prince came in, programmed the drum machine for the whole song, and then just hung out and kept tracking over it. So, whichever version you prefer, take that one to heart.
Which one lives in your heart?
Definitely the version where he just came in and took over everything. Because it's funny, when you listen, I mean, one of the other quotes that Stevie has given about this was like, I was in a pretty bad drug phase at the time. So it's just like, yeah, she might have just been snowblind, like off in the corner, just watching Prince work as he just kind of came in and silently bullied her and Jimmy Iovine into letting him play all over their song.
So as Prince toyed with Purple Rain, he sent a 10-minute instrumental version to Stevie to ask her to write lyrics, and she basically caved. She told The Guardian, it was so overwhelming, that 10-minute track. I listened to it and I just got scared. I called him back and said, I can't do it. I wish I could. It's just too much for me. And I'm so glad I didn't, because he wrote it, and it became Purple Rain. Later, Stevie would walk out of the premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater of the Purple Rain movie over the scene where Prince slaps Apollonia. When she told Prince, he chastised her, saying that it would have made sense if she had finished the movie.
Such a power move.
Yeah.
I didn't like that scene where you hit someone, where you hit a woman, and Prince going, you should have stayed, it would have made sense. Even after all this, the song wasn't done evolving. Keyboardist Lisa Coleman told The Guardian that Prince was still thinking of it as, quote, a country song when Wendy Melvoin joined the band, once again at 18 years old, on guitar. One day he decided to fool around with it at rehearsal, Coleman said. Wendy started hitting these big chords, and that rejigged his idea of the song. He was excited to hear it voiced differently. It took it out of that country feeling. Then we all started playing it a bit harder and taking it more seriously. We played it for 6 hours straight, and by the end of that day, we had it mostly written and arranged. Drummer Bobby Z, who says he was basically just doing an impression of a Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham once the song kicks in, remembers it similarly. He says Purple Rain was brought in at the end of rehearsal. We had just gone through the set twice, and Prince said, I want to try something before we go home. It's mellow. Once again, First Avenue. Oh, I actually didn't mention this earlier. The First Avenue show, the one that was recorded and multiple tracks of which form the bedrock of the Purple Rain album, was Wendy Melvoin's first live set with the band. So that immortal Purple Rain intro that she does with all these crazy spread voicing, finger splaying jazz chords was her live debut with the band. She recorded it with a Rickenbacker guitar with the F-holes taped over to prevent feedback into the legendary Boss CE1 chorus pedal, which is one of the most recorded guitar pedals of the 1980s. Prince was famously a Boss guy. Did you know this?
Oh, yeah.
When someone showed his pedal board at a show, it wasn't one of these crazy shoegaze rack things that you would imagine, like that I have, or you would imagine like My Bloody Valentine or having. It was just like the size of a small briefcase, and it was all Boss pedals. Boss, for non-guitar pedal nerds, are like some of the sturdiest pedals you can buy. You can change a tire with them, but entry to mid-level. That guitar and a copy that Melvoin had were both stolen from her studio at one point, which brings us to this episode's It Belongs in a Museum. Wendy was still talking about this as of top of this year. I think it was a January 24 interview where she was like, I still go on Craigslist, eBay, used gear sites looking for those stolen guitars. She gives a great in-depth playthrough and interview to, I think it's Premier Guitar, where she just like is sitting down playing the Purple Rain part. And she was talking about how Prince showed them this on the piano using mostly just triads. And then her finger-stretching jazzy intro is all in the upper chord extensions and what she calls the blue notes. And Prince loved it. There are live videos, not just from the First Avenue show, but from other shows around this time where he just like walks around the stage, seemingly overcome with emotion as Wendy and the band just circle around that chord progression for minutes at a clip before he gets to the first line. Prince overdubbed extra tracks onto Purple Rain at Sunset Sound as well. I found this via this guy named Nate Johnson. He has a site called Chops Angeles, which is medium good. And he just goes around a bunch of LA icons. And so he did a tour of Studio Sound, and he doesn't name the guy. He says it's the studio manager. And that's a guy named Paul, the owner, a guy named Paul Camerata, but he doesn't name him in the article. And he says this guy confirmed a long-standing Prince rumor about recording Purple Rain at Sunset Sound. Prince asked him to go get purple sheets, purple pillowcases, and a purple bedspread to go on the bed that Prince had brought into the studio so that he could lay down and rework lyrics when the mood struck him. So, let's get the numbers out of the way. Purple Rain was released on June 25th, 1984, a month before the film came out. It became Prince's first album to reach number 1 on the Billboard 200, spent 24 consecutive weeks, just under half a year, up there at the Billboard 200, and was present on the chart for 167 weeks total. When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, while Purple Rain peaked at number 2 and I Would Die For You peaked at number 8. When Doves Cry, of course, famously to me, kept Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark from ascending to the number 1 position, which would have been Bruce's only number 1 hit. In May of 1996, Purple Rain was certified 13 times platinum by the RIAA, Recording Industry Association of America. It has sold 25 million copies internationally, and bear in mind, this figure is from 2005. So that's almost certainly more now. I think they just stopped counting. It's got to be like 30 in the 30 million range at this point. Prince and the Revolution won Grammy Awards for Best Rock Performance by Duo or Group with Vocal, Best Score Soundtrack for Visual Media. Prince also won an Oscar for Best Original Song Score for the film, and Purple Rain is both in the Grammy Hall of Fame and my beloved National Recording Archive at the Library of Congress, having been deemed historically significant motherfuckers.
The first single from the album, When Doves Cry, came out on May 16th, 1984. It was Prince's first single since Let's Pretend We're Married from 1999 in November of 1983, and its weird alien sound immediately captured the public. The video, which hit MTV the following month, was a similar sensation. Shot at the A&M Records soundstage in Los Angeles, it was set to be handled by photographer Larry Williams and directed by Apollonia. Before anything was shot, however, Prince told producer Simon Fields that Williams would not be needed. So Williams read magazines outside while Prince directed, choreographed, and starred in the video. Prince was cuckoo paranoid about letting anyone take control of something once he had it in his mind, Sharon Orrick, who produced the When Doves Cry video, said in The Oral History of MTV by Craig Marks and Rob Tannenbaum. She asked the director, Larry Williams, what she could get, and was told a stage, a crew, a bunch of cameras, a bunch of smoke, and some doves. The day before we're going to shoot, I was told, paint a room purple and get a bathtub and some candles. And the bathtub wrangler had to get 3 bathtubs so Prince could choose. Prince was 6 hours late for the first day of shooting and would communicate only through Simon Fields. At one point, he had a pair of long woolen underwear delivered, which he had wardrobe dye purple and fashioned into a small Smeato-esque undergarment, which he could wear in the bath. According to Lisa Coleman, also in I Want My MTV, the video was the first time the band had to perform choreographed dance steps. Prince tortured us in rehearsal, she said. He said, everybody come to the front of the stage. Let me see you walk. And of course, he started making fun of us. Again, like Bob Fosse.
Yeah. Producer Sharon Orrick also related this story in I Want My MTV, and I'm going to present it unedited. God, we should put like Brian Eno's music for airports under this. There was a story told at Limelight Productions about an early Prince video. Supposedly, there was a shot where Prince wanted doves released into the air, but the production manager decided not to work with an animal trainer because it was too expensive. So he bought some doves from a local pet store. When it came time to throw the doves into the air, he literally threw them from the stages, and they were immediately sucked into a giant fan, chopped up, and then sprayed around the room and all over the band. That was one of the first rock video legends. When doves die. God, what a horrifying image. A fine slurry of doves coating a fabulously attired Prince of the Revolution. What do you think dove meat tastes like?
Oh, God.
Helping build momentum for the film was the fact that Prince was resolute about not doing any press. Alan Light, who wrote a book about this specific period of Prince's life called Let's Go Crazy, told NPR in 2014, we really didn't know much about Prince. He did not do any press. It's amazing to look back and think Prince did not do one interview during the entire Purple Rain cycle.
That's nuts.
From the time that 1999 came out until after Around the World in a Day, the next album came out, he did not do one. Any kind of interview, any kind of press, anywhere.
So the singles are out, the album's out, the movie comes out, and Prince gets about 4 months to enjoy it before embarking on the Purple Rain tour, which began in November 1984. Des Dickerson, who left the band just before all this madness, saw Prince on the DC tour and hung out with him after the show. When he was leaving, he told Spin that he invited Prince to go shopping the following day at Georgetown, an old ritual from when the band came through DC. Dickerson remembered, at first he got this smile on his face and was about to say something, but then he stopped. I'll never forget. The look on his face changed and his voice dropped, and he said, you know, I can't really go out anymore.
To lighten the mood, it was on the Purple Rain tour that Prince instituted a new tradition for the live band. He would say, hit me, insert number of times, which the band would then have to incorporate into the very next bar of music. I think he got this from James Brown.
Yeah.
Bass player Brown Mark. Once again, the man's name is Mark Brown. I want to be very clear about that throughout this episode. Hit me 2 times is an easy instruction to follow, he said. But when he yells, hit me 25 times, we have to do a percussive hit 25 times. And if we miss one, we are fined $100.
He got that from James Brown.
From James Brown, yeah.
Besides the suffocating effect of movie stardom, for the creatively restless Prince, being trapped in one set of songs was his own kind of hell. I nearly had a nervous breakdown on the Purple Rain tour because it was the same every night, Prince told the Chicago Tribune in 2012. Adding in a separate interview with Icon, I was doing the 75th show, doing the same thing over and over, and I just lost it. I said, I can't do it. I knew I had to get away from all that. Tour manager Alan Leeds said in Alan Light's book, creatively, he was over it. I'm sure it was fun playing the music for a while, but this is a guy who never stopped rehearsing, so they were all tired of playing the songs long before the tour started. They'd been playing them every day in rehearsals for a year, and the crew had been hearing them every day for a year.
I cannot imagine. I probably would have put a bullet in my head.
Yeah.
6 hours of rehearsals, what, daily? Semi-daily?
Yeah.
Like 3-4 times a week, I have to assume, playing these songs. Then going out on tour, playing all of these songs. Holy crap. Of course, the show itself was also insane. 2-hour and change set, an average of 6 nights a week for 6 months with a lone 10-day break in the middle. More than 100 concerts, along with multiple after-party, charity performances, award shows, and recording sessions. And so it came to pass that on April 2nd, 1985, just 5 days before the tour's final date at the Orange Bowl in Miami, held on Easter Sunday, Prince announced via a statement from his manager, Stephen Fargnoli, that he was withdrawing from the live performance scene for an indefinite period of time, with that Miami concert being his last performance for an indeterminate amount of years. In the statement, Fargnoli added, "I asked Prince what he planned to do. He told me, 'I'm going to look for the ladder.' I asked him what that meant. All he said was, 'Sometimes it snows in April.'" And both of those are Prince lyrics and or Prince titles. And this is where it gets a little sad to me. Although Prince had been with, as we mentioned, some members of the Revolution, like drummer Bobby Z, for nearly a decade. Same with Matt Dr. Fink. The idea of having a band that was independent of Prince was pretty much a concept with an expiration date from the start. Alan Light told NPR in the aforementioned interview, Purple Rain was not an album by Prince. It was an album by Prince and the Revolution. And he made a very clear distinction that he was going to bring the band forward, put himself at the center of that. But the fact is, this is a guy who writes and sings and produces and is capable of doing everything himself. So how much actual input he's willing to take from them, how much of that was just about how he could use the band for positioning, how much were they actually a creative force was something that became a source of real tension as the project went on and as they went out touring and playing stadiums. Were these guys just hired hands, or were they actually a real band? That's something that they still struggle with. So by 1986's Hit and Run tour, which Prince used to promote both Under the Cherry Moon and Parade, the band had expanded to include a horn section, various others, but the core of the Purple Rain band had become more and more isolated through tours and releases of each new project. And this is where Sign of the Times comes in. This was originally supposed to be another Revolution project, and I don't know at what percentage through the process that Prince pulled the plug, but
it was a solo Prince album when it came out in 1987. Drummer Bobby Z told Yahoo in 2017 that Prince was, quote, starting to become, finally, after being a superstar all those years, kind of like, I kind of want to do this myself again. I was kind of getting the sense that we had become such a huge part of his everyday life that he may have, we don't know that he was growing a little tired of it, but we're a handful. I mean, we weren't just sidemen. We were the Revolution, and we opened our mouths often. That's a great way to phrase that. We became more of a satellite, Lisa Coleman told Spin. It hurt our feelings. He used to travel with us on the same bus, but then he got his own. He would always be escorted ahead of us in his own car, and we were left behind. He had his big house, and when he got the guard at the gate, it was, wow, dude, it's me. I did your laundry. I lived with them for a while in his house. I'd fix him a sandwich or we'd do laundry together. It was really brother and sister stuff. When it changed, I'd have to go through other people to talk to him. I was not into that. I'm still not into that.
such a bummer.
Yeah, it's sad.
I knew something shifted our last night at Japan's Yokohama Stadium, Wendy Melvoin told Yahoo, referring to the Revolution's final concert on September 9th, 1986. We were on stage, and he started calling a whole bunch of different people on stage with us while we were playing. He hadn't done that before. And we knew him. I knew him so well. He wasn't looking at us. I could feel it. And then we played Purple Rain, and he destroyed the guitar. He destroyed it. I looked at Bobby, and I went, "It's over." I looked at Lisa. "It's over." And it was over. Prince fired Wendy and Lisa first. At the end of the 1986 tour, he brought Wendy and me over to his house for dinner, Lisa Coleman told Spin. We always called it the paper-wrapped chicken dinner because it was wrapped in pink slips.
Ooh.
Yeah. In the same interview from 2016, she also suggested that Prince's Jehovah's Witness faith had come between them. He has hinted to Wendy and myself recently that he can't condone who we are or be friendly in certain ways. We both have kids now with other partners, so that hurts, especially because he liked that element in his band back then. Bobby Z would be replaced by Sheila E., or he left out of solidarity with Wendy, Lisa, and Brown Mark. But Prince magnanimously supposedly kept Bobby Z on the payroll for a couple years out of loyalty. Classy move. Dr. Fink stayed on until 1991, but the Revolution had made an impact on Prince. Bobby Z said, "Prince called us Mount Rushmore. He knew that this was something unique. So with the sound of doves crying ringing in your ears, join us next week as we leave the sonic world of Purple Rain and enter into the visual world of Purple Rain. That's a kicker, but whatever.
I liked it. I loved it. I thought it was
I'm
great.
spent. My name is Alex Heigl. This has been Too Much Information. Thank you, folks, for listening.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.